I think this is a problem in general in our world.
Yeah.
Where what brings us together is actually what pulls us apart. And sometimes it's the church, sometimes that's politics, sometimes it's whatever. It's like we get hyper fixated on all the problems and not trying to be a part of the solutions.
Yeah.
And not to say that there aren't a million problems, because there's a million problems in our world, in our church, our country. And that's, that is part of living in a sinful world. But I think the biggest thing is being a part of the solution.
Welcome back to Ministry Reimagined. I loved this episode because Leo is someone that exudes ministry and life inside and out. And you can definitely see that in the work that he does and the programs that he runs. And in this episode, we got to talk about being part of the solution in the problems that we see in the church and the world, and not just being complacent in the roles that we're in. Stay tuned. Hi, Leo. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Excited to talk. Yeah.
That's awesome. Good. I'm excited. I've seen some of the work you do with, Passion Play. I think that was a big one.
Yeah.
I've also seen you won Hive. Well, you've done a couple projects, and I'm sure you have more that I haven't even named. But I've seen some of the work you do. So, for all those other people that have also seen some of the work you do, what is something you wish that they knew about you?
That's an interesting question. I have grown up being very involved with the church and very upfront. That was one thing that when I was little, some people are more involved or less involved. My parents put me in front of for everything. It was like singing, speaking, memory verses, everything. They just always were throwing me up front. And so I kind of got used to the stage. And as I got older, I think definitely maybe a little part of me, if not a big part of me, if I'm being honest, maybe that did get a little bit to my head. But I've always just been very comfortable up front, which is weird because I sometimes get into these moods where I feel very awkward and I don't want to talk to people. But put me on a stage and all that awkwardness and that fear, that stage fright is not there. So that's something interesting about me, because sometimes talking to people is weird, but being on stage speaking into doesn't matter how many people, the fear is out. It's weird. It's really weird.
Yeah, usually people are the opposite.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's something about me, though.
Talking from your experience, you said that you've, grown up in it. What was that like? Yeah,
so to make a long story short, I grew up in a family I was born and raised here in Berrien Springs, Michigan. I've lived my whole life here outside of a few years that I took I went 1 year to Europe and I went 1 year to Southern. Outside of that, I've spent the entirety of my life here. My grandparents on both sides of the family are pastors. So my parents are both PKs. And my family, once they kind of graduated, my parents I should say, once they graduated from Andrews and got married, they were already very involved in particularly the Spanish church. And so they were always planning events, whether it was children's events, college student events, high school student events. They were always just very involved with the church. So I grew up in that. My mom studied medical laboratory sciences, so she works at the lab. And my dad actually studied architecture. And he did that for about 15 years. And when I was about 7 or 8, he felt God calling him to do ministry full time, which was a big leap. Our family went through all sorts of difficult situations, financial, trying to figure out how we were going to get to the next day. We definitely went through some struggles. And although I was little, and my parents were in a general sense pretty good of hiding those things that were going on, I did notice them. And as I got older, I kind of looked back and noticed that I did notice them and not knowing that I noticed them. But always very involved in the church. I always had a pretty good experience with the church. I've had my fair share of moments where I've definitely been frustrated with the church. But in a general sense, I've had good experience within the church so far. I've also seen others not have great experiences. So I've seen both ends, but I've definitely, if I'm being honest, I've definitely seen more so. I've been on the more so seeing the good side of the church rather than the bad side. Although as I've gotten older, I feel like it's starting to switch, and it's that frustration starting to kick in a little bit. But I also feel like I'm in this unique situation as a young person, fresh out of college, where now it's my calling to start trying to get out there and start changing these things that I see that are wrong.
What's kept you? Because I know for a lot of people, when they've grown up in the church, as soon as they develop consciousness to think of for themselves, they leave and they run away.
Right.
What's kept you?
You know, I think that's a challenging question. I think the best way of saying it is I've always grown up with this consciousness that God and the church are two different entities. Yeah. Oftentimes people loop them together, and they see Christians and they see these things that they do that shouldn't be done, or these behaviors that shouldn't be the way they shouldn't be behaving, and they characterize that, well, if that's what a Christian's like, then I don't want to be associated with that. I don't want to be associated with that God. And I've always kind of grown up with this consciousness that these people they're just being idiots, and they are not being good representations of God. And I've always had this stronghold in who God is. Yeah. I shouldn't say it always, but I've had this stronghold knowing that God is loving, and that these characteristics that are being shown by man, by people, are not good characteristics of him. So although I have, and I continue to go through this experience of life, trying to discover all of what God is, I know that what I see of these people isn't characteristic of what God is. And so for me, I've been frustrated with the entity, maybe with the church, with the building, the group of people. Yeah. But my frustration has never been directed to God. And I can't quite explain why. But I've just, for whatever reason, it's always been very clear in my mind that God and the church should be the church should be representing God, but it doesn't always. Yeah. And that's why I think what we're called to go and be the change of.
Yeah. And that's so hard, because when you're part of something, or when you're trying to be part of something, part of a religion, a group of belief, you want to find people that you, identify with, and that you see as maybe not role models, but right. But yeah, someone to look up to in the same thing of your values and what you believe in. And if you don't have that, then where do you go? You leave. Right.
And I think that's what's really hard for a lot of young people, is that they don't see that group. And I do believe very strongly that church is meant to be a community. Yeah. And when you don't find that community in the group of people that are surrounded in your area, especially, that becomes very challenging to be connected with. And I do believe that although church is not the cornerstone of someone's relationship with God, I do believe that it influences it in some way. And so not having that, I think that's why a lot of people our age are struggling, because they don't find that place where they feel they're welcome. They don't have that place where they feel like they're part of a community. Yeah. And so they drag themselves out, not because of their relationship with God, but just because of their relationship with the other people. And that distance rather causes them to start losing that momentum that comes naturally in a church that is cohesive.
Yeah. I want to pick your brain a little bit.
Sure.
And I want to ask, as someone that's, trying to be part of the change for that and trying to fix it in a way, what is something that you think more churches should be doing to kind of fix that gap, or build that community for people?
Yeah, so I'll use an example from my work. So I work for One Mustard Seed. My title keeps changing. My current title is I'm the Chief Operating Officer, but it's been the Chief Marketing Officer. Yeah. It keeps changing. When you work for a small ministry, your title kind of always changes. And one thing that we've had a lot of conversations as an organization. One of the things that I keep bringing up is, guys, there's things that we're doing that are wrong. And we all know it's wrong, and we don't know what the right answer is, but we can all acknowledge that it's wrong. And I think the church has a lot of those things where we're so set in our ways that we don't want to acknowledge that things are wrong. The first step is acknowledging things are not working. These things are not progressing us forward. And I think one of the biggest things that I see with a lot of especially small churches is that there's no youth. My family's always had a very strong belief that church growth starts with the families and the kids. A lot of these churches, you look at them, and it's all about the 30 up to whatever age. They're not catering to the youth. They're not catering to the college students, high school students, little kids. And those are the seeds that are going to bud and allow your church to keep growing. And I look at even some of our local churches here and how the children's programs have died, or not died, I guess, but are digressing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's always been really frustrating, because we wonder, why is the church, dying? Why? Because we're not being intentional towards these kids. If you really want to see a church grow, it starts with the kids. And I think back at my experience when I was little and I was at the Spanish church. There's all these little kids events that were constantly, whether it was during church services or, on Sabbath afternoons, on Wednesdays, whatever. But everybody was there. Yeah. Everybody was supporting the kids. And I always felt the support as a kid. And so it excited me to be part of this wonderful group. Yeah. I think that's one. And if I had to name a second, which I'm also very passionate about, and I expressed that a lot as we planned Passion Play here at Andrews University this past year. Secondly is we and I don't want to just say as an American culture, because I think it's outside of outside of the U.S. as well, but I notice it particularly because I live in the U.S. We have become very complacent as a church, and church has become a place where you come, you sing a couple cute songs, you listen to a sermon, you may or may not like it, you go home, and it's like any other day. Yep. Some people will get on the couch and watch a sports game. Others will, just continue on their lives as if nothing else. And I'm not saying that you should live your life one way or another. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But there's no sense of community. There's no sense of involvement from a lot of people. And I am just as guilty of it as the next person. And that's one big reason that we started Passion Play here at Andrews. It started with myself, my wife, and then two of our friends, Justin and Katie Mertz, who we worked, my wife and I, Bethany, we worked at camp with Katie and Justin. Katie first, and then Justin came along once we started dating. I went to Southern with them as well. But we got to the point where we're like, we got to do something. We had been sitting on the sidelines and just, having this feeling where it was just, you go to church, you go home, you go through the week, go to church, go home, come home for the week. And we were like, we got to do something. We got to stop waiting for somebody to make the first move. We have to go make the first move. And from there, it was just a domino effect. We kept finding these random people, and I could go on and on about my experience with Passion Play, because I'd be thinking, God, I need to find a person that might be able to help with this. And then that week I just run into them, and I'd be like, we'd start talking. I'd be like, we're trying to do this project, and it grew and it grew, and then got to where we got. Anyways, all of that to say, I think the two biggest things is youth involvement. And secondly, it is getting your community involved, or your congregation involved rather. And creating this culture where church is not a place to me, church should be like a meeting. You get the information, you learn, you understand, you feel nourished, you commune, and then you go out and do work. And a lot of churches, I should say, are not working in that same manner, where it's become a performance in a lot of ways. And although there may be that spiritual emphasis, at the end of the day, it's just a performance. We just do the performance. We try to make it as God-centered as possible, and then we just do it next week. That's not what church is meant to be, at least not in my view. So, yeah. That was a lot of words to make those 2 points. But
there was a lot of such heavy truths in there that I think not enough people talk about in a way that church is a performance, like you said.
Yeah, I think a way to not make it a performance, and I think a lot of people are already doing this, but obviously it's being intentional about what you're doing. When it comes to song service, oftentimes we see people who will just, pick the nicest songs that they like, and it's the songs that sound the coolest, and they'll play that. But when you're intentional about connecting that to the worship experience, I think that's one way. Yeah. I think, especially when it comes to sermons, I think that there's two spectrums that I've seen. There's the spectrum where it's like heavy, like doctrine, and it's like, we're going to talk about the nitty gritty. And then there's the other spectrum where it's like, Jesus loves you, he's great, you should, da 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 da. And I'm like, and I think it should be a blend. And I also do think that part of it is being intentional with your community. As a pastor of a church, you should be one of, if not the most knowledgeable person as to what is going on in your community. What are the struggles that they're going through? What are the things that are hot topics right now? And having the ability to adjust and say, let's say, right now there's a lot of drama between, one church and another church, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But just having the ability to adjust and say, this is what's relevant to us right now, right here. And sometimes it's going to mean going away from the planned schedule.
Yeah.
Just being intentional in that sense. And then secondly, it's just getting people involved. One thing that sometimes frustrates me as a leader, and I'm also guilty of this at times as well, so I can't speak too much, and it's something I'm actively working on, is we get comfortable working with the same people all the time. And so it's like, this is my group. I rely on them. They're consistent. They're great. They're excellent. And so I only work with these people. And the other 80% of the church, they just sit there. I don't think that's the way it's meant to be. Especially, I grew up and felt that a lot with the music experience on campus at times. And I think, it definitely progressed, I think, as I went through college. But I remember early on, and even before I got to Andrews, that there were moments that I noticed, I'm like, I see the same people up there every week. And that's great for them. They're very talented. I can't say anything about their talent. But to me, church and community, and even on campus community, it's about getting everybody involved, getting everybody to fit a place. And not every time is the best person going to be in in this specific position, but that's okay. The people that are the best should be the leaders. They should lead and help and guide and teach people to become the next generation of leaders.
I want to know, because I've also noticed kind of seeing how programs are run, like Vespers, and how everything over there is run, and what it's like to find a praise team and find a speaker. And how it is always the same people. But I'm curious to what you would say about, or not about, what you would say to the people that I guess aren't volunteering themselves. Do you think anybody could lead and they just have to figure out what they're good at? Or do you think only some people are called to lead in a way?
No, I mean, I definitely think that there are specific people that are just natural born leaders or are called to be leaders. Sometimes they're not natural leaders, but they're called to leadership. And no, I don't think that, like, for example, like with music, I don't think that, we should just throw anybody up there. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But we should be actively pursuing those people who want to be involved in that ministry. And I remember when I was a freshman particularly, and a sophomore at Southern, that there were times where, like, I find these people that are highly talented and they want to be involved, but they can't find a way in. And they'll try once and then they'll give up, which they shouldn't do. They should continue to pursue. But it's important for our leaders to create a culture. And this is, again, I feel like we're talking about music. This is definitely not just music. This is in general. This is all sorts of leadership positions and positions in general. But we should constantly be pursuing people and finding out what their talents are. There was this one kid I remember in high school that I went to school with. And I remember, like, he arrived and he was not from the U.S. And super talented at the guitar. And he just wasn't involved for the longest bit, and it was just because people weren't pursuing him and weren't asking him. And then once they discovered him, he was involved with everything. And I think there's so many of those hidden gems out there where they're there. And I do believe we should all be pursuing to find ways, but I do also believe that the natural born leaders are the ones that are supposed to be going and finding those people. And it's not always going to be easy. That's also one thing that sometimes frustrates me as a church, is that sometimes we do the easy thing because it's easy. I'm like, guys, we're not called to do the easy things. Sometimes programs are going to be complicated because we're going to be pursuing another mission on the side. And that's okay. It doesn't always have to be easy. I know you worked on proximity this last year, and I worked on proximity the year before. And that's something that for me was always something I was very passionate about. It's like, we got to find ways to get more people involved. And did I do a good enough job with that? Looking back, I didn't. And I have to be real with myself. And that's also something that fired me up for Passion Plays, because I realized I didn't do as good of a job as I should have. I didn't, help in the ways that I should have. I wasn't so supportive as I should have been in certain ways. And I tried to use that to adjust that. I use that and adjust that to help me grow. Because I do feel part of being a good leader is learning and growing and acknowledging, hey, I was wrong. And that's okay, because I made my mistake and I learned from it.
Yeah.
Let's change it though. Let's figure out what was wrong and let's move forward. So, yeah.
Taking the time to reflect on
For sure.
what you did and what you might not have done the best that you could. That's
For sure.
That's good.
And that's something that's I don't know if underrepresented. It's not acknowledged in leadership. Oftentimes that people view a leader as the one that is intelligent enough to make all the right decisions. But that's not true. A leader is often going to make the wrong decision. And I think part of the leadership process and part of growing as a leader is looking back and saying, I didn't do this right.
Yeah.
I didn't do that right. I didn't do that right. And I'm going to change it moving forward. But I learned, I grew, and I'm not going to let that stop me. And I think that's what makes a great leader, is that they're not afraid of failure. They acknowledge it, but they're not afraid of it. So
That's good.
that's probably the way I'd put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you've probably done a couple of volunteer work for the church when you were growing up, to now being, I guess, I don't know if you would say employed by the church, because I guess you're kind of self-employed in a way, like a startup, small business.
Yeah.
What was that process like? Were you always thinking you would work in the church somehow, or did you have other plans?
Yeah, so I'll probably have to go back to when I was in maybe my sophomore year of high school.
Yeah.
Or my freshman year of high school. So when I grew up in a heavily involved ministry family. And early on, when my dad first started ministry, as a lot of people that work in ministry know, you have to make sacrifices in order to get by, because you have to make money somehow. And that's something that sometimes frustrates me about ministry, because people don't understand that in order to do ministry, there has to be money. And I think of groups like, for example, Brazil. I think they're doing amazing with ministry. Why? I think there's a lot of people pouring into it. Not just time, which I think is huge, but also financially. I see other churches as well that they get poured into and they're able to do big things.
Yeah.
My dad, what he had to do, a lot of what his ministry was surrounded around in order to make money, was he would go do these events at these churches. So, let's say, a church in Texas would call and say, hey, or my dad would call them and ask if they'd want to do a seminar. So he would do 3 events. He'd do a Friday night event and a Sabbath morning during church, and then a Saturday night. And the topics all were targeted towards kids and families. And he talked about 3 of the controversial topics. Not controversial, really, but just faith-strengthening topics.
Yeah.
The first one was always the argument of creation versus evolution. Because a lot of Christians, I think it's, and I'm trying to remember what the stat is, but I believe it's like 80% of Adventist kids don't go to Adventist schools. So a lot of them are going to schools where they're being taught evolution. They're being taught that this is how the world works. And at church, they go to church, and what do they talk about? How, they'll talk about Bible stories. And that's great. But then these kids have a lot of these blank spaces in their head where they're like, it doesn't add up. So we would talk about that. Second day, he would talk about the flood, which kind of connects with it, or the second talk. And then the last one to talk about is dinosaurs, which has been our big, that's what kind of put us on the map in a lot of ways, is our topic of dinosaurs. Because for the longest time, I don't think our generation as much, but previous generations, dinosaurs and the Bible did not connect. Like they were viewed as 2 different things. It's like, if you believe in dinosaurs, you can't believe in the Bible. But as science has progressed, we can actually see the correlation between the 2. So that's, anyways, to make a long story short, that's what my dad would go around and talk about. And he'd go to these churches, and he'd be gone a lot, because to do a Friday Sabbath events, he's leaving on Thursday. He's there Friday and Sabbath, and oftentimes most of Sunday he's getting back and whatever. So he'd miss a lot. And when I was little, I held a lot of animosity towards that, because he would miss, an occasional game, sports game or event at church or whatever. And I would always be very frustrated, because he was never there. And for me, I didn't at first really want to be involved in ministry when I was kind of really little, because I was like, I don't want my kids to experience that. Now, I make it sound like it was awful. Obviously, there was a lot of upside to growing up in that environment, and I'm making it sound like it was all bad. But there was a lot of frustration that I held inside. And then as I started getting older, I was really I always really loved camp, and I went to Camp Asauble in Grayling, Michigan, and I was a camper. I really loved it. And one thing that I always remember about my experience at camp was that I was always enamored. I don't know if that's the right word, but I was always like looking up to these camp staff, and I was like, they're always so happy, they're always so excited, they're hardworking, they're fun to be around, and on top of all of that, they love God, and I can see that in everything they do.
Wow.
And although I wasn't probably thinking of it as deeply back then, I did notice that, and as I grew up, I really started noticing that as I went to tween camp and teen camp, and I really, really wanted to be a part of camp ministries. So as I grew up, I remember, it was the summer before my junior year of high school, and my parents were like, the summer before my sophomore year of high school, my parents were going for 2 weeks because my brother's 2 years younger than me, so he was going to tween camp, and then I was going to go to teen camp. So, and they had me volunteer for tween camp, and I loved it. I loved being with the staff. It was so much fun. And then I was a camper, and I had a terrible cabin, and it was just bad. It was a bad week, and I was like, you know what? I'm done being a camper. I want to be a camp staff. So the next year, my parents went to volunteer for teen camp, and I should have been a camper, but I was like, I want to be a volunteer. So I volunteered that summer, or that week, loved it again, and then the following one, I went back and worked. I was 17 years old. Again, loved it. And I started to really realize that, to me, something that really gave me a lot of purpose and a lot of joy in life was just being a part of ministry. And so as I started to shift there, that was kind of going into my senior year of high school, I started really realizing, I really want to be involved in ministry. At first, I was all PT. I was like, I'm going to be a PT. My cousin's in PT school now. He's the same age as me.
Wow.
And I was like, that's what I wanted to do. But then I realized I wanted to do ministry. And I kind of wavered back and forth because I tried to think, do I want to do the pastoral route, or do I want to do a different route? And I decided to do a different route mostly because, and I respect all pastors out there. I'll start by saying that.
Right.
But pastoral ministry is very different than the ministry that I grew up in.
Yeah.
Because with pastoral ministry, there's a lot of stuff you have to deal with. There's politics, there's dealing with people. And I just wanted to do. I just wanted to make projects happen, see them come to fruition, work with all groups of people, big events, TV, audio. I just wanted to do everything. And again, I think pastors are super important. But I just didn't feel that my calling was in that direction. So I decided to study marketing. And I went to Andrews, then I went to Southern for a year, came back to Andrews, then I went to France for a year, studied there, and then I came back to Andrews. So yeah, that's kind of where my calling to ministry went. And throughout the last, through the 5 years of college, I always wanted to find ways to grow that and to grow as a leader and to learn. And I got to be a part of a lot of really cool teams in the process, and got to learn a lot. That's actually set me up a lot now that I'm post-school and in the workforce. So, yeah. Sorry, those are my really
good.
long answers.
What do you think makes a good leader?
I think that's a really complex question.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of things that make a really good leader. And some of those things I don't think I even know how to put into words. But I think at core, a leader is somebody who can put people in the right places to do their very best work for the cumulative goal.
Yeah.
I think a leader is someone who can communicate well and say, this is our goal and this is how we're going to get there. I think a leader is bold enough to make the decisions, the hard ones maybe, in order to get where the group needs to get. I think a leader is kind, a leader is patient. A leader can see situations or can see people and put themselves in different perspectives. And I think at core, a leader is someone who, again, is able to harness all those different things and guide people towards the goal and find people to get to the goal. I think a good leader does all those things and more. And I also don't think that leader is like the word leader. I don't think that there's a peak where it's okay, you are a leader now. I think it's a constantly developing thing. You have to be able to adjust, grow. You have to be willing to take fault, take the heat sometimes, which that's definitely one of the hard parts of being a leader, but that's just part of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, being a leader is tough. It's definitely a calling that takes a unique kind of person. But I also do believe that anybody can really get there if they really feel called to it.
Really?
So I know that kind of is contradicting, but
No, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that, I guess, intentionality that it takes from a person.
Intentionality and experience. I think being a leader takes time. I don't think it's something you wake up and you're a leader. I think it's something you have to go through the growing pains and make the mistakes and make the connections and being intentional. Yeah.
Do you think you need a title to be considered a leader?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh man, what is his name? There's this kid. So an example of where you don't have to have a title to be a leader is there was this kid and he's like 10. He's like 10 and I can't remember his name. But this past spring at Passion Play, there was one scene, it's Pilate's Judgment Hall. And there's this crowd of people. And there was this kid that was he's like 10 and he was the loudest one.
Wow.
He would, at every practice, was just going all out, super into it. And I was always like, wow, because he really set the tone. I think that's also part of being a leader, is setting the tone, leading by example. And yeah, I think there's obviously different angles to what being a leader is in certain situations. But no, I don't think that being a leader needs a title. I think being a leader oftentimes is just being the example and putting yourself forward and putting yourself out there and taking the risk. And sometimes a title is not associated to that. I'm sure you and many others have experienced that in life where you feel like you've been leading somewhere and you don't have a position. And I feel like that's actually something that can corrode what being a true leader is. Sometimes we're pursuing these titles and the title becomes more important than the actual art, the actual reality of being a leader. Yeah.
You said there's multiple aspects of ministry. There's the pastoral route and there's other routes of ministry, but what would you define as ministry? Does it have to be work within the church to be considered ministry?
That's a tough question. I think ministry, in what I see it and I believe it to be, is the constant pursuit of, or the organized pursuit of reaching to people that maybe don't feel represented, or maybe don't feel like they have a home, or the inclusion of people, bringing people together, all under the goal of leading this group of people to Christ in some way, in some form. And I don't think it needs to be in the church. I think that there's a false illusion that it always needs to be associated to the church. Our ministry is not, we are technically everything we do is for the Adventist Church and with the Adventist Church beliefs and everything, but we're not technically connected to a church or an organization or the NAD or the Michigan Conference. We do a lot of work with them. We partner with them, but none of it is through it. And I don't think that ministry needs to be in the church. I think in a lot of ways, when ministry is not done through the church, it can be uniquely powerful because oftentimes we come at it with the goggles of the church. And when you're doing ministry outside the church and you're using whatever God has given you, your environment, your area, to kind of drive your ministry, oftentimes you can connect with people in a really unique and special way where the church may not be able to, which is why I think it's so important for our community, our church community, to be outside the church and reaching out to them, because they all are interconnected somehow to somebody. And that's part of their ministry. It's their organized, bringing people closer to God. And that doesn't always mean the church. It means closer to God. So, yeah.
Closer to God doesn't always mean closer to the church.
Yeah. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, I think the church is not always representative of God.
Yeah.
I think it should be. But we're sinful. And we make mistakes. Yeah. And we're dumb sometimes. God and the church are two different things. The church should lead to God, but God and the church are two different things. And we need to keep our eyes focused on Him and not let the church become a fog screen to what God is calling or what God is asking or the way God is moving or whatever.
Okay. what is your ideal picture of church? What does it look like for you?
That's a tough question, because I am of the opinion that church is very different for every person. I've definitely walked into experiences where I feel as if I'm like, this isn't really for me. Yeah. And whether it's the music or maybe the topics that they talk about or whatever, the flow of the program. And this is something that I kind of go back and forth with my parents with all the time. But I do have an opinion that there are always going to be all sorts of different types of worship experiences, and that's good. For example, there's Crosswalk out that I think is started in California, but now they're all over the U.S. and even international, and their worship style is very like, the music is really good. They do the same songs, I think, across all their campuses, and then they have like specific topics that they talk about all across their campuses, and it's very direct for the youth and for whatever. And for me, when I sometimes go to Crosswalk, and I don't have anything against Crosswalk, but for me, sometimes I'm like, I want a little more. Like, I want a little more depth, and I want a little more substance. But then I see the people that are involved at Crosswalk, and I see how many young people are there, and I see how passionate they are, and I see how moved they get by their worship experience. And I'm like, I wouldn't want them to stop. I wouldn't want them to change, because what they're doing works perfectly for their audience. And they're creating this movement in their community and in their church that, if I was in charge of it, I don't think I would be able to. Yeah. So I don't think that the worship experience, a church experience, should be this kind of cookie cutter, same everywhere. I think of even different cultures, and I'm like, if I like, for example, I grew up at the Spanish church. If we tried doing Spanish church, maybe at PMC, like, it would be like, whatever. Yeah. Like, and that's not to say that PMC is bad, but it's just different churches have their different ways of doing it, and that's the way they connect with their congregation. And again, going back to what we were talking about earlier about a leader, especially a pastor, you have to have the ability to read your community, read your congregation, and create the worship experience that best meets them. Yeah. I don't think it's meant to be the same. I don't think that God created each and every one of us different. Yeah. I can't imagine if we were all exactly the same and we just had like a number. Yeah. I'm number 4, I'm number 3, or whatever. Like, no, we're all meant to be different, and I think worship is meant to be that. But I also do believe that worship is meant to circle around Christ and about glorifying Him and worshiping Him and learning more about Him, discovering more. Yeah. But yeah, I would never put it in a certain cookie cutter, way of doing program, because I think it's meant to be dynamic. We're all different, and I think that our differences is what is able to bring us together and kind of connect, and also glorify God in our different ways and connect with Him in our own unique way. So, but again, to get kind of at core, I think a church is meant to connect with their community in a very unique way, but at core be teaching Christ, growing people closer to Him, and creating a community in which we're not just called to again, come to a place and worship for a day, but rather make an impact, a 7-day impact across our area. And I think churches are all going to do it differently. Do I think that there's one church that's doing it perfectly? No. Do I think that, all our churches should just stay as is and just that's what's working is just stay that way? No. I think it's a constant development and growing and learning. And,
I want to ask your advice and what you would say to the young people in the world that are maybe they've grown up in the church, maybe they haven't, but maybe they're willing to learn more and find their place in a church. Maybe they haven't found their church home yet, but they're looking. What is something you would say to them?
That's a tough question, and that's actually something that hits very close to home. This past week or two ago, I was sitting with some of my friends, and we were kind of talking about that, because we look at, especially now, it's summer, and all the students are gone, and they're all at home, and you go to PMC, and I go to PMC, and it looks pretty old, you just don't see a lot of young people.
Right.
And you don't see a lot of people that are at the same phase of life that I am, or the people around me, or my friends. And we're like, man, like, what do we do? Like, like, where are all the young people? And I think based on my experience and based on a little bit of the person that I am, the way I'd answer that question is just start something. Start something on the side. And it doesn't even have to be like a church service. It can be a youth group where you just try to find people and we're like, all right, on Wednesday nights, we're going to go bowling, or we're going to do an activity, or we're going to do a beach day or whatever. It's creating that community. I think something that a lot of people are scared to do sometimes is to start something new. And sometimes you just have to start something new. And that's a lot of what, again, for me, Passion Play was. It was just, you have to do it. You have to start it. You have to go for it. And a lot of young people, and I think a lot of people, I don't even think it's young people, are just waiting for something to start that they can jump on board with. And they're scared to take the first step, to start something new, to be outside the box, to go for it. And so they spend their entire life sitting on the sidelines waiting for something to happen, for a blade of grass to turn over, or a leaf to sweep by, in order for, for them to be moved to move in a certain direction. And my encouragement to young people, especially people in college and in high school, is if you see something that's not working, if you see a hole somewhere in the church, in your life, in your community, go be the answer to that. Don't be afraid of being the answer. And also don't be afraid of failing. Because there's times where you're going to say, this project is going to work and it's going to be perfect and everybody's going to show up. And they may not. Yeah. Understand that part of life, and this isn't even just church, but part of life is learning. A lot of people are afraid to learn and to make mistakes. Go for it, make the mistakes, and if there's anything you take away from a mistake, it's the learning and the growth that will allow you to succeed later on in life. So yeah, just don't be afraid to go for it, to start something new. There are people out there that you will connect with. You just have to go find them, and it's not always going to be easy. And that's something that I myself have been trying to teach myself, is life is not always meant to be easy. And like people, I feel like people have this false guise that like life is meant to be easy. I'm like, no, it's not. And that's the hard parts of life is almost what makes it more rewarding. You know, I think of even like my time at camp. I was a counselor, and sometimes as kids, I was just like, I want to strangle you because you won't listen, you won't whatever. But then I look back at that week and I'm like, man, that was like one of the most rewarding weeks. Don't be afraid of hard work. Don't be afraid of failing. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Because, again, even when you make a mistake, you grow, you learn, you move forward. So, yeah, just go for it. Don't put your foot on the gas and just go. Just go. God will lead. God will tell you where to turn. And sometimes you may get off the road because you might want to go your own way. But that's okay. Just get right back on and just keep going. Keep going. Keep moving forward. Don't let life pass you by. Take every opportunity you can and enjoy life. Life is so short. Life is so short. So, yeah.
That was awesome. I feel motivated.
Yeah.
I feel encouraged. But I will say there is, I think what stops a lot of people is, yes, the fear of, or maybe I don't feel qualified. But I think a lot of it is also they will see that hole and then not feel like they just don't see that solution part of it. They just are okay with having that hole and then being mad at it because no one's filling it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So they're just upset that the problem is there, but then they just won't do anything to fix it. And then they're mad at, oh my gosh, all of Christianity is bad because no one's doing anything about this hole, and that hole is just there. But they don't realize that they can be part of that solution.
I think this is a problem in general in our world.
Yeah.
Where what brings us together is actually what pulls us apart. And sometimes it's the church, sometimes that's politics, sometimes it's whatever. It's like we get hyper fixated on all the problems and not trying to be a part of the solutions. And not to say that there aren't a million problems, because there's a million problems in our world, in our church, our country. And that's, that is part of living in a sinful world. But I think the biggest thing is being a part of the solution, being positive. I know that's one thing that like my wife and I talk about all the time, and I give her these TED Talks sometimes, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I'll tell her, I'm like, that's the end of my TED Talk. I'm sorry.
That's so funny.
But it's just about seeing the world, seeing where I can change, seeing where I can be better, not being a part of the complaining group, but being a part of the solution group. A lot of people, especially more so on the church side of the world, are love to critique, but when it comes to actually standing up and doing something, they'll stand on the sidelines. They'll be one to say, yes, this and this is wrong with the church, and this is, they should do this and this and that. And then I'm like, all right, let's do it. And then it's like, no, I don't have time, or I don't know. And I think, and I'm like, guys, like, you can't complain and then not do anything. And so that's actually something that's encouraged me a lot as I've worked in ministry, because there's a lot of people that will critique anything that I've done. I've been a part of, I've led at camp, stuff with work, stuff with church, passion play, whatever. There's always going to be your critics that are going to critique you. But for me, what kind of blocks me out is, like, if you're not willing to do something about it, then it's not that I don't respect your opinion, because I respect everybody's opinion, but I'm not going to take it to heart. Because I look at our church, and for example, I look at things like passion play, and there's been dozens of people who have talked about wanting to bring back passion play, and it's been a topic of conversation many times. But nobody's willing to go do it.
That's true.
And between myself and the group of people that, I surrounded myself with and that carried a lot of the project, like, we were the ones that did it. And there's these people that are like, well, if I would have done it, I'm like, well, you didn't do it.
It's true.
You didn't do it. And, like, I appreciate your input, obviously, and I'll take that as, constructive criticism as much as I can.
Yeah.
But you have to, you can't let those things bother you. And again, I kind of got off topic there.
No, it was true.
Yeah.
That was perfect. I have one more question, and I want to know if there's a book maybe you've read, maybe it's in the Bible, maybe it's an outside book, maybe it's a quote or a saying that you've heard that has, like, stuck with you and shaped you a little bit.
There's many. I feel like my brain right now is, like, my whole, like, personal life is just the constant, like, running quotes. The text that's kind of gotten me through my life, a majority of my life, is Psalms 16:8, which is, I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. And that's been the testament to my life. Because I've, just like everybody else, I've gone through my frustrating moments, my hard times, my moments where I've felt very alone, unsupported. And that text has always rang true in my heart. When God's at my side and God is the one that's fighting my battles for me, I don't even have to worry about it. And that's something that I've been trying to drive into my mentality as I've gotten now into adulthood, where I'm like, man, when things go wrong, I'm like, man, God, I don't get why, but I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna learn from this, and I'm not gonna let it bother me. And that's not an easy mentality to have. And that's something that I've encouraged a lot of the people closest to me that are struggling and that come to me. I'm like, you got to view life in this way, where it's, a lot of people, again, think that, like, oh, everything's falling apart and whatever. I'm like, you just got to keep moving forward. You got to understand that there's a bigger picture to this. We all go through life and then we'll look back and I'm like, oh, that's why. But when we're in the moment, we don't live like that. And I'm like, I want to live like that, where I'm like, I may not understand exactly why, but I know that in 5 years' time or 10 years' time or maybe 30 years' time, I'm going to look back and be like, oh, okay. So try to view life, with as much confidence and joy as you can. Not saying that there won't be hard times, not saying that you won't feel down and that you will cry and that you will be frustrated and whatever, because I definitely have those moments. But try to focus on what the greater mission is. Your life is a string of 80 years. And for people like us, we're still in the first 20 years. We still have like 60 years left. And a lot of people get caught up on, like, all this stuff that's happening in this year, this last year, this next year, whatever. And I'm like, this is such a small portion of our life. Stay focused. Keep doing your best. The not the quote, but the thing I always tell my wife, it's just kind of our joke now, is I'm like, be great. Like, just be great. A lot of people don't pursue greatness, and I have this very unique position on what greatness is. I feel greatness is something that is, it's inside of every single one of us, but not everybody looks to unlock it. You gotta pursue greatness, and greatness doesn't mean having tons of money, having tons of time, having the best friends or the best house. That's not what greatness is. Greatness is having a relationship with Christ, being centered, being grounded, enjoying the things that life gives you, helping the people around you, impacting the people around you, living a selfless life, focusing on others, building things up for other people, involving people. I could go down the list.
Yeah.
But it's this at the end of the day, it always comes down to be great. Be great. And that's what I tell my wife. I'm like, we got to be great. We got to be great.
Wow.
So,
That's good.
again, a long answer to a short question, but that's probably the way I'd wrap that. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Wow. That was a good analogy of the string. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I definitely feel encouraged. I feel like I need to go be great and do something and not just find things that are wrong with organizations or programs and go be part of the solution.
Go be the change. Go be the, world changers made here is our quote here at Andrews. And a lot of people may view that and laugh, but it's true. We need to go be world changers. We need to go be the change, be unafraid, move boldly.
Yeah.
And, trust God in all that we do. So,
That's awesome. It's really good. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
I
of course.
had a great time and I feel motivated.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. If you liked this episode and you want to support this podcast, please like the video, subscribe so you can see more, and comment so we know what you think. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.